discuss grant writing. And the reason that I was choosing grant writing as an assignment was first because having money will support your research and that will help you get published. So grants are an integral part of the publishing process. And second, it's a kind of writing that looks very specifically at the values of the institutions that are offering you money, and therefore you have to write very specifically in response to those values. Now, all of the publishing, you look at values, but often they're implicit. In the grant writing, they're often explicit. And it's a kind of writing you may also find if you should apply for a job or some activity like that, where people, you want to present what you know in a specific way. So in these slides, we're going to look at some of the aspects of grant writing and an example of a grant from Ohio State that I didn't get, that I had applied a few years ago, as a way of looking at what are the specific terms. So the first step is obviously to choose an appropriate grant that fits your background and interests. And again, for this assignment, it's up to you to choose what kind of grant you want and which you think you have the best shot at getting. You need to do some research to look at what are the goals of the grant. And for example, in this example, which came from an organization called Digital First, which is supplying Apple iPads to students, it says Digital First strives to inspire innovative instruction via emerging technologies. So I've highlighted, for example, the term emerging technologies. So that's one of the main focuses of the grant. The focus of the Digital First Impact Grant is to build creative, pedagogically sound teaching and learning practices at The Ohio State University. So another aspect of the grant that you need to include is how are you going to have pedagogically sound pedagogies, and then student-focused mobile technology. So in this case, it had to do with iPads, but in the focus again is to include student mobile technology. So often you can actually plagiarize or copy certain key terms from the grant and include them directly in your response. So you need to be able to identify the values underlying the grant. For example, and this is to increase student engagement, to facilitate greater instructor efficiency, to enable anytime, anyplace learning, to document the effectiveness of mobile learning, to redesign an existing course into a dynamic, mobile-friendly learning experience. So via iTunes and or iBooks. So these are concepts that came from the grant, and what you need again to do is specifically include how you're going to accomplish all of these ideas, or at least as many of them as you can, in your grant application. So one of the things, again, try to find if there are any past awards, provide an outline of your proposal, that is what you plan to do and how your proposal is going to meet these values, and focus on your goals and your objectives for your research. And so this again is about you and how well your goals and objectives match the goals and objectives, in this case, of Ohio State's Digital First. Now, in some cases, you may not be able to meet the goals, and that you have to be able to identify the problems that where you may have problem in meeting the goals and how you're going to deal with it. So, for example, in this grant, you needed some department match of 50% of the funding and department in-kind support and financial contribution toward the project. How you're going to do that often they give you a variety of ways of doing that, but that was a particular problem because our department didn't have any money to contribute, but they may have something like faculty staff release time, or they may have some equipment laying around that you can use, and so on is required. So you need to be able to respond to these challenges and demonstrate that you can overcome these problems. And often there are limitations on what you can't do, so it's very important that you identify that you're not going to do the kinds of things the grant says you're not supposed to do with the money, but still be able to accomplish the goals of the grant. Third, you need to spend as much time as you can researching the application process. So in this case, for example, the Digital First was giving some question and answer sessions that I could attend, and if I had any questions about the grant, I could find out. Unfortunately, what happened when I went, I got some conflicting answers. So it wasn't always as smooth and precise as you might want, and then again, it's back up to you to try to resolve these conflicts. So usually in the grant, there are criteria for evaluating the grant. And again, for us, this of course is important because it forms the rhetorical structure of the grant. That is, how are you going to argue your case? So, for example, it could be in here departmental impact, that is how this is going to affect your department. And again, this could be things like it'll increase the faculty participation in using technology. There's a grant for student travel, for example, that's again meant to show that going to a conference is going to impact your academic research and maybe help your chances of finding a job. And so you need to include that kind of impact. You need to be able to show what your success is. So you have to sort of demonstrate what would be, even though you haven't achieved it yet, what would illustrate your success in receiving the grant, that what is it that you can accomplish with this grant. You have to demonstrate your ability to deliver. So this may mean something simple, like you're a graduate student, or that you got accepted at a conference, or that you have some background in that area of research. Often the grantor wants to know what kinds of outcomes and deliverables. So this could be a paper, it could be a seminar that you might give. So there are a number of ways of demonstrating that you can give something very specific on returning or finishing the grant. What kind of resources do you already have? So there may not be enough, say, money to do everything, but you have to be able to show that you can do something. So again, the key thing is that when you get the grant, they want you to demonstrate that you can use the money and finish the project. So each grant that you're going to write you need to ask very specific questions that you need to answer. For example, you need to make it very clear what your project is and what is it that you plan to do. In many ways, it's like what you've been doing in papers. What's the problem that you're going to address? Why is the problem important? And what is that you hope to do? Once you look at what the grant asks for, how are you going to address the grant? How well are you going to be able to address the problems? What is the importance of this work for you, and perhaps for the people giving you the money? Make sure, again, the word importance is very critical. What's the scope of your grant? That is, how recognize what you're able to accomplish, what you hope to do, and again, why is this going to be useful? what methods are you going to use? So often they want to know so that you have a clear set of methods that you're able to demonstrate that you're able to accomplish what it is you plan to accomplish. How are you going to assess this? Do you have a way of knowing that you accomplish what you plan to accomplish? What's the probability of success? So these are all questions that you're looking often to see whether or not you are going to be able to access it. Are there any limitations or problems that you may need to address in doing the project? And again, the overall idea is that they want you to be able to use the money, and you have to demonstrate that you're competent and capable enough to use the money they give you. How timely is this? What often they ask for a timeline, so you see specific, when are you going to accomplish what you plan to accomplish? So you have to plan that ahead. What procedures are you going to use at each stage of the grant? You can use diagrams in order to explain this, and you may need to use a budget. You may need to include how much money specifically are you going to spend on each item. And again, it goes back to what are you allowed to spend the money on and what are you not allowed to. So that requires making sure you have a careful reading of the guidelines for the grant. And finally, look at your proposal, review it, have other people read it, make sure it's clear, make sure it's as well written as possible. Remember, these people are going to be, it's often very competitive, and they're going to be looking for any reason to disqualify you. So finally, to review, again, make sure the grant fits who you are and what you're doing. Often they can be very specific. What kind of research? What do they hope to accomplish? What are your goals and objectives? And again, make sure your goals or objectives are in line with what the people who are giving money are looking for. What kind of evaluation criteria are they trying to use? So, I mean, you have to be able to accomplish the grant. You have to, your research has to make some contribution. Make sure all of that is very clear. Make it clear what the contribution is to the field or to your life. And depending on, Ohio State, again, wants you to do well in your dissertation. They want you to be able to get a job. And so make sure that you show how, if they give you money, how the money will help you accomplish those goals. You may need to, what support you have beside the grant. Often the grant, as I said, doesn't cover everything. What kind of funding may you have to supplement it? Could be personal, could be departmental. What kind of documents do you need? For example, you might need a CV, which we'll talk about later, to demonstrate that your background, and make sure again you have a clear budget, exactly how much things are costing, so that they know that if you need an airline ticket, how much is an airline ticket going to cost? If the grant doesn't match that, where are you going to get the funding? So again, Bruno Latour wrote, build them a lab and they will come. That's the general idea, is that money is often very important. It's critical when you write your paper that you acknowledge the money. Nowadays, sometimes they want to know where your money is from. And as we talked with ethics, not revealing the sources of your funding could be considered an ethical violation. So, but also the people giving the money want to be sure that they're recognized as being funders. So all of this is part of your writing process. In this class, students have made a lot of money, from the course, getting grants. And so it's a good opportunity for you to work on a specific kind of writing and hopefully find money to help your research and future publication. Thank you.